Hello. So I want to start with asking you a question today. Do you feel loved growing up? Did you feel loved by your caretakers growing up? If you answer no, well, then we know. And I'm going to come back to that. If you answer yes, I felt loved, I want to ask, how do you know? And if you answer, well, I don't know, I just know. Yeah, how do you know? I just know that they love me. And then I want to ask, okay, so is it a thought? Is it a thought that you know that they loved you? Or is it actually something that you felt and feel? So if you answer no, I can't say that I actually felt it or feel it, but I know it. Okay, so then it's more like a thought. It's like a preconception. It's like something you know, but it's not really something you felt or you feel, okay? Or if you answer yes to the first question, yes, I felt love and I really felt it and I feel it. Good for you. Then you have felt and you feel love, and you probably were surrounded or had an upbringing that your parents some way or another managed to succeed to actually have an open heart with you, which you could feel and be a part of. And they managed to actually have some openness with you. So there could be space for this sensation, this feeling of love. Love is a feeling, it's not a thought. It's not something you do, it's not something you say, it's a feeling, it's a state, it's an energy, exchange of energy around between people. So it's a feeling. So if you have that feeling, yeah, then your parents somehow or your caretakers manage to be open and exchange that feeling, and good for you then. Good for you. I'm not saying you can't have it was not perfect, and I'm not saying it comes with flaws and whatever, but if you've had the sensation of, yeah, I'm loved and I felt love, it's good. It's a very good foundation for growth. But if you're saying, no, I wasn't loved, I know I didn't feel it, then okay, then I wouldn't be surprised if you are here because you had depression or anxiety or different kinds of destructive behaviors in your life. Let me know if that's true. If there is a correlation of not feeling love and destructive behaviors or different kinds of mental disorders. And again, the same thing if you know that you're saying, to be nice, I know I was loved, but I didn't feel it. Also, think about, is there a correlation between actually not feeling the love and problems with your mental health in life? My suggestion is that it is a very clear correlation between lack of love growing up and emotional problems later in life. I would say love is the foundation. It's like the vaccine towards everything. It's really like the foundation. It's like the protection toward every kind of threat coming from the outside, which actually if you don't have the protection towards threats coming from the outside, it will come in to you and it will give you symptoms in the form of anxiety or depression or other kind of or disillusions. Yeah. So love is the protection towards threat coming from the outside. So if you're a child who feel very, very loved and then feel loved, so they learn what love is. they are filled with love. And then they start school, and they meet like a friend who bullies them. The love that they already have in their body will protect them from from the bully, from the words that comes from the bully. They will not deal with it at all in the same way as a child who has no experience of love and has no love in him or her. That child, when confronted with a threat from the outside for a bully starting school, that child will take the bully's word in, and it will become reality. It will become truth in that child. It will have no protection because it has no self-worth. So that child is very vulnerable toward external threats. And the external threats, very, very vulnerable towards the external threats becoming internal threats, becoming mental health eventually, and developing different kinds of strategies to deal with the mental health. For example, addiction. Or for example, hurting yourself, cutting yourself, or hurting yourself and others, like self-sabotaging behavior, as we've talked about. If you've had love from the start, you most likely won't need to engage in sabotaging behavior because you are protected. You know your worth. You know you are loved. And that is a vaccine. So I encourage you to think about, like, if you always wonder, so what's wrong with me? Why did I have so many problems? Like, why am I always scared, and why am I always anxious, and why am I depressed, and why do I always, mess it up in relationships, or why am I an addict, and or why do I run through my life, and blah blah blah. All of, just think about, if you have all those questions, think about the very, basic concept of love. Did you feel loved growing up? Do you feel loved now? Do you feel loved now? Do you know what love is? Do you know what it is? Actually, have you felt it? And I know it's an abstract thing, but when you have really felt love, you actually do. And many people can think about it and they know it, but it's not the same thing. It's really not the same thing knowing that you're loved and really, really feeling it, because then you really, really trust it. And when you really trust in love, then your potential of giving yourself what you want in life is so much bigger. So trust and love goes hand in hand, right? Totally. Because when you feel loved, you feel trust, you feel faith, because you know that you are held. You know that you are held. So it's sort of like, that's a religious experience, or let's say, spiritual experience. Love is a spiritual experience, because you learn in a very young age that you are loved. So that you can trust someone else to protect you. And when you learn that in a very young age, that you can trust someone else to protect you, then you will learn growing up that you will learn how to protect yourself, and do good things for you. And actually, as a parenthesis, that's the problem with people who actually have no concept of love. They have no experience of love, I would say. They weren't loved growing up. They grew up in neglect. And when they then enter healing communities and they engage in different exercises that promote self-love or promote contact with with outer space, with other consciousness. They open up their consciousness and they get an altered state of consciousness, maybe through psychedelics, and they feel what love is. I would stress that there is actually a risk with that. Because if you have no experience of the earthly love of what it is to be loved by another person, truly and protected, and you engage in this universal love, then the risk might be that you're just seeking the light, but without taking care of your darkness and your neglect and your inability to experience love in this earth life from another, in a basic way, from another person. I would say you need to take care of that first, to be aware of if you have experience of being loved and what love is in totally mundane, sober state. What I've said many times before, don't skip the step of, what is love? How is it to really feel love? Be very aware. See what are the answers of the feelings. Do I felt loved growing up, and do I know what love is? So basically, I want you to start to think about the correlation between neglect growing up and later self-neglect, right? And start to think about the correlation between the lack of love growing up and, again, your way of dealing with the lack of love as an adult, and look at all behaviors, look at all how you live your life. Might it be that you're actually trying to escape the fact that you are so hurt because you didn't feel loved, or that you're trying to chase love by engaging in certain kinds of relationships, or taking drugs that make you feel all fluffy and loved, or chasing or working a lot, so chasing admiration and love that way. So you start to consider what is the correlation between the lack of love or having a lot of love and how you have, dealt with life later on. It's all we need is love. It's really true. It's a cliche, but it's really protection towards disease. It is. So first, I would like you to understand this really, like if understand yourself, all of your problems in that way. To think about all of your problems in that way. That just consider, did it have the root in how I wasn't actually loved as a child, or I didn't feel the love anyway? Because just to say, I'm not saying that your parents didn't love you, but it might be that they also, if they didn't succeed in making you feel loved, it's not because they don't have love in themselves. It doesn't have to be like that, but it's that it's resting. The love is resting, or it's locked in, or it's shut down, or it's not there. And I would say that it's the definitely responsibility of the parents to be able to open their heart and give the child love. However, it might be that they are just repeating a generational trauma. So there are reasons to why maybe your parents didn't succeed in giving your love. It's their responsibility, but there are reasons that they couldn't. So if this is you, and now you're saying, okay, so yeah, that's true. I didn't feel loved, and I'm ended up here in this. I have a lot of problems. I have had a lot of self-destruction and self-sabotage and self-neglect and all that. So what do I do? Well, to answer that, we first need to understand, okay, what is love? Accept that it's a feeling. So what is the conditions where love is grown? What's needed in order to share, to exchange love? Well, first of all, I would say what is needed, it's the ability to take the other person's perspective, to take that in. So for a child, for a parent to truly be able to love a child, the parent needs to take the world of the child in fully. You cannot love another person if you're just in your own perspective, your own world. And I think that's the biggest mistake, or that's the common thing that parents said. Oh, I did everything for you. Yes, I loved you. I did everything. Did you really? Yeah, you did everything from your own perspective. You did everything you thought I needed. But you didn't actually engage in my world as a child, my perspective, who I am, what I like, what I think about, what I am afraid of, what I don't like, what I love, etc., etc. So I would say that that's the foundation in order for love to flourish, to be expressed. The ability to take the other person's perspective. So for you, if you were the child, were your parents able to really listen to you, to really secretly try to understand you? Because maybe, you know, as a child, you cannot always explain what you want, but that's actually the role of the parent to try its best to really understand this little new being that is here, to understand the child, and to understand the child better than the child understands itself. So when the parent does that, when it's open up and really try to leave your own perspective and do and go enter the perspective of the child, that's the first step to love, I would say. Obviously, you know, many parents, they feel this, that everyone says, oh, I never knew love before my child comes, when it was born. So many parents feel that, you know, feel that love when they have this baby, but then eventually when the baby grows up and it becomes a personality, then many parents, they slip into enactments of from past relationships from generations before them, how you are programmed to treat your child, which is actually you. So that's another thing that parents need to understand, that this child is you. So the way you treat yourself, you will treat your child as well. So that's the problem. If you treat yourself poorly, if you don't really understand yourself, you won't be able to understand your child. And that's very unfair for the child if you haven't done your work yourself. So if taking the child's perspective is the foundation for love, so what can that teach us about how you as an adult should do if you haven't felt loved, if you don't know love, and if you are not in a relationship or anything, if you're alone? Well, that's the first step that you need to do, that you really need to start to be curious and interested in yourself. Don't cheat and expect someone else to be interested and curious in you if you haven't learned to be it first yourself. Yes, of course, it's good if someone else is interested and curious in you, but don't look at it as a solution for your neglect growing up, or don't look at it as a solution for your incapacity to see yourself as curious. It's not a solution, but it might be that you can view that person as a guide, as a teacher, but then you still need to do the work yourself, because that's hard. If you don't have an experience, if you never had an experience of someone you loved, a caretaker, of someone you were dependent on, you really, you know, let go of their own world and just try to understand you. You have no idea how to do that. And also you have a lot of resistance in doing it because you really long for someone else to do it for you. So either you live your life all shut down and you just continue the neglect, or the neglect, and not you know, loving yourself at all, or you are shut down but at the same time expect someone else to love you and expect someone else to be curious. This is basically the types of personalities that I've talked about before. Either you're passive and you shutting down, and you're self-sabotage in a passive way, or you do it in an active way. The active way might be more risky, not only for you, but also sabotage for other people. The passive way is often mostly bad for you and not so much for other people. But anyway, that's the way to love, that you need to start to be curious in yourself. As I talked about in another video, see your anxiety as information, and you need to hear your perspective out. And it might be if you have a lot of neglect in your childhood. I mean, just to say that neglect, emotional neglect, it really makes you a weirdo. I'm sorry to say, but it really makes you think in really weird ways, you know? It's, you know, it's sad, but it's true. And it's a danger if you don't understand this, that if you grew up with emotional neglect, you are at the risk of having really, you know, delusional perception of reality. If you think about it as extreme, like a child growing up without physical contact, like in a dark room, you know, it's easy to say, of course, that child is going to be a bit, you know, effed up. If you don't have relationships, if you don't have, I mean, basically, you don't exist if you don't exist in someone else's eyes, right? So if no one else really saw you, you never got an experience of existence. So it goes beyond love, you know. It's if no one else loved you, okay, but if no one else saw you, if your needs were neglected, not only like not physical needs, that's also, but especially emotional needs, that really makes you think in a very different way of yourself and of reality, because you don't develop enough. I even looked up what the definition of parenthood is, and it's you're supposed to protect and be responsible for your child, and you should promote their physical and mental well-being. And so if you as a parent, you didn't protect your child and you weren't responsible, and also you neglected their needs, then you won't develop normally. So be aware of if your parents weren't able to take your perspective and really understand you and see you. They might be that they weren't able to really exchange the feeling of love to you. And if they didn't, it might be that a lot of your problems is run from that. It has that as a source. And now you might think, well, I did have a house, I did have a lot of things, I went to a lot of activities, and etc. etc. Yeah, maybe, but it potentially doesn't mean that someone actually engaged in your perspective, in your world. And why do I stress that? Because it's so important for the experience of that you are a person that exists. I met so many people who didn't have this experience, and they are really scared of, voicing their thoughts, and because no one were interested. And what happens to these thoughts inside? Well, they are sort of immature because they haven't voiced them. So an adult haven't been able to give feedback on the thoughts and to help them, mature and develop. So if you're an adult who never voiced your thoughts, no one were really interested in your perspective, then it's possible that you're an adult who has sort of immature thoughts and a lot of projections, and it's just a mix up of feelings. You haven't been able to get support and guidance in your own development. So emotional neglect is really dangerous, I would say. It's devastating. It gives a lot of consequences. But the task now is not to blame someone. It's not to blame without doing the work yourself. It's difficult to think about because it's easy to go into blame mode. Well, the reason why I'm like this, it's because of my parents, it's because of my caretakers. Yes, it is, I would say. Yes, it is. It's your DNA, and it's how well your parents succeeded or not. It is because of that. However, the solution is not your parents. You understand the difference? One can think of, yeah, it's their fault that you have all of these problems. It's the neglect's faults. However, the solution, the healing, is not their responsibility, because now you're an adult. So that's the tricky thing. It's your responsibility now as an adult, because they failed, not because, we don't know. Yeah, because it's a generational trauma thing. So it's your turn now to maybe break the generational train and stop the neglect of yourself and stop the self-hate and start instead learning what love is and learning to take your own perspective. And in the same way, just to add that we can think that it's my parents' fault that I have these problems, we can also think, yeah, it's their fault that I have succeeded in this and this and this way. So that's also your parents to blame, So that's the thing about being a parent. You are blamed for everything that happens to your child. Both the success, because your child is you, and also the problems or the mental health is also because of the parents. So it goes both ways, because as a parent, the child is you, and if the parents doesn't love themselves and doesn't and neglect themselves, they will do so with their child. So if this is you, if you didn't feel loved, if you had emotional neglect in your childhood, it's your parents' fault, but it's not their responsibility to heal you. It's your responsibility, and now it's up to you. And especially if you have children yourself, really be aware of, do I know what love is? Do I know what it is to really take my own perspective and to understand my own perspective? And do I understand, can I then let go of my own perspective and take my child's perspective? It's crucial that you do, so that you don't pass on this generational trauma of neglect and of no love. And as a last thing to add there, taking your own perspective might not be that you are just listening to everything you say that is right, because if you grew up with neglect again, it might be that your perspective is kind of weird because it's immature. So if you, as an adult, start to take your own perspective, it's not only about listening and thinking, yeah, validating that you're right, because you're not a child anymore. You validate the child and you guide the child. But if the child's brain, if the child doesn't get guidance, it continues to be the maturity of a child, but in an adult body. So if that's you, if you start to take your own perspective now, it's not about just listening and thinking that you are right in your thoughts, but it's to trying to understand yourself. That's about taking your perspective. So to summarize, consider that your problems that you have in life is whether or not you felt loved, and also it's on a spectrum. People who felt surrounded by love has probably dealt with life in a totally different way with people who not only didn't feel love, but also, were abused or attacked. And then we have everything in between. So consider where you are on this spectrum, and then also be aware of the foundation for love is the ability to take someone else's perspective. And the ability to take a lot of different perspective is the foundation for wisdom. So how to heal, how to start to give yourself love so you can give other people love, is truly to start to understand yourself, to take your own perspective and not agree with everything, but to start to listen and get to know yourself and to love what is there and to work to understand yourself as deeply as possible, because that is what a parent do to the child. Even though we don't always like what the child is saying or what the child is acting in, we stay and we try to understand and we guide. So that's the work to do with yourself, especially if you had neglect, emotional neglect growing up, and lack of love. So please leave comments after if you watch this video. It truly helps me to be motivated to create more content like this. So if this resonates with you, please leave a comment. And also I will do a short exercise in another video on how you can start to grow self-love and self-perspective. And so you can make use of what I'm talking about, really. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if it was. Thank you very much for this video.